Oh, this is odd. I don't know if we're live or not. I'm not seeing it on YouTube yet. So
it's weird.
That is very weird.
Wouldn't be the first time I've had that problem where I've tried to stream something and YouTube isn't quite streaming it. Or
so I see it on YouTube.
Done streams to nothing. Okay, good. We're live. Yay. YouTube's working today. How's everyone doing?
Well, let me check the rest because I'm getting everything else. It looks like, yeah, we're live on Rumble. So that's a good thing. And, well, I don't know. I guess we're live on Locals. I can't tell. So hopefully somebody on Locals, let me know if we're live there. And theoretically, we're also live on X, but God only knows at this point. How is everybody doing?
Good.
Great.
All right. So, we've got a nice group here. I haven't really followed what's been going on in the week. There seems to be some crazy trial of a former president in New York. It's just like an ongoing thing that there's either indictments or charges or something seems to happen every week involving the guy. So I think, Nate, you were trying to explain to me how you think that he is guilty as hell and needs to be buried and fined and to lose all of his businesses. You want to elaborate?
Oh, well, I'll go right into it. So in reading the judge's ruling, it just seems very clear cut to me. It was like, you said they were worth this. They were appraised at this. The government taxed you at the lower rate, but you somehow said that they were worth 2,000% more than what it was. And a lot of them were pretty dumb. Like, you have a 10,000 square foot home, which is great. 10,000 square, that's great. You know, he's a billionaire. But then you say it's 30,000 feet. So that seems to be a problem. And like, for instance, some of the funniest retorts I've been seeing on X have been, well, you see, the Mar-a-Lago house, Mar-a-Lago property, which is, I think, is one of the most blatant issues here, was the Mar-a-Lago property was valued at, I think, $18 million by the tax assessor. So this tax assessor said, hey, we're going to do, $18 million. We're going to tax you on $18 million. The property's only worth $18 million. Mm-hmm. Then he had, then there's a professional appraiser that comes in and says, well, we're going to do it at like 30 million, whatever that number is, right? And then he, on a loan form, says it's worth like 500 million. That's, so now the argument was, well, the property is clearly worth 500 million. Well, if that's true, then you've committed tax fraud because you're supposed to pay that, because the tax man, you just told him it's worth 18 million. But then, so if it's not worth 18 million, but if it's not worth 500, but it's worth 18, so it's just all complicated. So I like to have everybody's like, well, it's obviously worth more. Well, if that's true, then you're saying he committed tax fraud. Well, it's obviously worth less. Well, then you're saying he lied to the banks. Now, I do want to say, I think a lot of people are missing a couple of important facts with this case. None of the banks complained about the loans. None of the banks complained. All the banks got paid back every single dime, right? No one ever complained.
Which is unusual, isn't it?
No, it's not, because the fraud here is also can deal with the amount of the money the banks should have made if the numbers were correct, right? So if the banks are giving you loans for if like, for instance, if you're a millionaire, your interest rate's going to be less and you're going to get more favorable terms on a loan. If it's a lot, if your value is less, then they're going to charge you more interest rates and give you less favorable rates. So the banks are, so essentially that's the difference here. The banks are not getting as much interest as they would have gotten if they knew the truth.
Okay, question on that before we go too deeply. I mean, okay, let's say it's going on. When I went to, buy my house, obviously my property values aren't anywhere near in that spectrum. The banks actually would say, yeah, your house is in this area. They had actual numbers themselves, and they kind of were like, okay, yeah, this is within that range. And then I've been paying taxes on it. Now, the taxes I pay are on the assessed value versus the appraised value. And I think this is kind of significant to note because I'm just going to throw numbers out there, taxes on, say, like $200,000 of an assessed house. Meanwhile, the house next door selling for almost $400,000. Holy shit, that's a big difference between the two. Now, is that possibly a factor in this scenario?
Well, so hold on. In your example, you said, was it 200,000 to 400,000?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think a proper, analogy would be 200,000 to maybe 2 million.
2 million.
Yeah, that would be the range. And then I would also say too, I think that's what the court is essentially saying. The court, because a lot of people say the court made up these numbers. Like the court's not making up any numbers. There was appraisals that were done and submitted to the court. There were the tax assessors numbers. They were submitted to the court. And then there was the bank numbers that were submitted to the court. And essentially you get, I think, a 5 to maybe even, I think, up to 20% difference in the numbers, not 2,000%. At what point?
But you said the bank's not complaining either.
Oh yeah, the bank's not complaining. And it's just
holy
like
shit, they're not saying, hey, he took our money. Well, Trump, he defrauded us. None of that. They're like, hey, paid us back. Good to go.
It's just like if you rob a bank and the bank doesn't file charges. Right? No, it's just like no.
Perfect analogy there, Nate.
I am.
Right.
If you go rob the bank, right, and the bank doesn't file charges, you get but nobody actually files charges. The state can still prosecute you for that crime. The pressing charges thing is is something that a lot of people don't realize. The crime is against the state.
Yeah, I know that because you and I have argued that one out before too. Because I'm like, shouldn't the state prosecute somebody for supposedly this crime? You're like, well, the person didn't press charges, so they're not going to do it. I'm like, well, I thought it didn't matter. So
it doesn't. It absolutely legally, it absolutely doesn't matter. Right. Your crime is against the state. That's why it's the people of the state of whatever versus this person. So even if somebody assaults you and you say, I don't want anything, but it's caught on camera, they can still prosecute you for that crime. But generally, they need the witness to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So in this case, the state is like, hey, even though the victims, the alleged victims, aren't complaining, we have enough.
We hate Donald Trump, so we're going to press this. Let's be honest, Nate. Come on.
All right. No, we hate Donald Trump, so we're going to press this. But now can you prove it beyond not beyond a reasonable doubt? Here is based on a preponderance of the evidence. And they're saying, well, here are the documents. If this was beyond a reasonable doubt, we got a little different story. But here's a preponderance of the evidence. Here's a preponderance of the evidence. A versus B. Are they reasonable? The court says it's not reasonable. And I think when you're talking about 2,000% increases in between appraised, assessed, and loan value,
I would like to audit. I would like to audit the bank and look at the standard practices in New York. I have a funny feeling that that Donald Trump was in real estate, and something tells me this isn't that uncommon and probably not always prosecuted. And again, I'm not excusing if there's necessarily a crime. I'm just saying this is very, very interesting. It does seem to be a constant march.
But we're not thinking that the bank just said, hey, fill out this form online on Rocket Mortgage and whatever you tell us it's worth, and we'll just take your word for it, that this bank isn't doing any due diligence on it or have independent guarantees that make it so that they don't really even need to care what he's saying it's worth because they have other recourses for the money. I've got a house that's in line with the average citizen probably, and having said that, I've been involved in the deals with people who have a lot of money, and the banks behave differently in scenarios like that. In my opinion, it's not normal because they can get security from these people that are beyond what a normal person can get, and the money amounts are so large. But I have not seen one that didn't care about collateral. I haven't seen one who said, well, if you say it's worth 200 million, I'll just take your word for it. So I really think, and I don't know what Trump's total defense on this would be, but I would think the bank would have done its own independent due diligence and not relied on Trump's assertions of value. I can't believe it wouldn't.
Trump's defense was, the defense team's defense was, these values are all subjective, you really can't rely on them. But again, you still have the problem where, you're assessing it with one value for one entity, you're assessing, and obviously there's going to be variations because what happens is you get the deranged say, well, they're not the same. Of course, they're going to be variations. Everyone understands you have 10, 20%, possibly. But when you start talking about 2,000%, it's like at a point, it's like, what can you really, can you really justify that? They can't justify that. They can't even justify that. So
I'll also note that in some ways, at least, the sort of profile of how this prosecution is happening is not atypical, particularly in white collar, because it tends not to be the first thing that you do. Like the typical white collar prosecution, right? The typical white collar criminal is someone who's escalating, starts out small, becomes bigger, more brazen, taking more and more risk. And then eventually someone somewhere notices. And then when they start noticing you, then they start going backwards in time and starting to find out everything that you ever did ever. So basically, when you hit that tripwire of irritating the prosecutor, they're going to go back and examine you every possible way. It's very sort of common. So the idea that they were irritated at Trump and started looking for reasons to prosecute him is, in some ways at least, comparable to how some of these crimes manifest. Of course, there is a obvious political motive that can't be ignored, but there's some aspects to it that are also normal.
When you run, because she was literally running on a platform as I'm going to get Trump. That makes it all suspect. It makes it very suspect. No, but it's just weird because I understand there's a lot of people who are out there who want to just say, hey, there's nothing that Trump can do that's wrong, and no matter what the evidence is, he's innocent. But I'm just saying this is not the standard case in which you got to believe certain this. It's a documents case. Here are the documents. This is what A and B says. Can you make an argument for fraud? Can you make an argument that somebody's living in a house for 20 years, who's a 10,000-foot house, who's putting on their documents at 30,000 feet? Is that right to do? Is that fair? But people are going to defend that because it doesn't. Damn the facts, damn the truth, right? It's just like, that's my guy. But I think it's hard to defend a real estate developer who knows about real estate, living in a place that's 11,000 square foot, but putting it on loan forms that is 30,000 square feet.
What about this question or this comment here, Nate? You are a representative of A, anti-Trump, and B, New York. So you've got to carry some weight today. Louis Rossman has proved in a video series looking for retail space, standard practice for New York City real estate is lying about everything.
So those people should be prosecuted. Just like
should be prosecuted.
90% of the people who drive speed, they should all get tickets. But because of constrained resources, you can only go after somebody. Or
selective prosecution. We'll pick different terms.
Or if somebody, do you want to catch the guy who owes $250 million or do you want to catch the guy who owes $25? $1,000 versus $250 million. I think you kind of have choices. Now, do I think the selective prosecution? Do I think Trump they would have been looking into this? No, I do. I agree with that. That is a point that needs to be said. But I think if this wasn't selective prosecution, you would think I want the guy who I think owe me $250 million. That's worth going after.
I want the guy who didn't pay back his loans. How about that guy? How about the one that didn't pay it all back? That might be a good one to go after. How about the one who's actually trying to slide through a bankruptcy or out of debt or something that they misappropriated, whatever. But the guy who paid everything back,
if you're a prosecutor, if you're a prosecutor and you find that you believe this guy owes you $250 million in back taxes, pay back the loans though, but you believe he owes you $250 million versus a guy who didn't pay back the loan and you think may owe you $20,000 in back taxes, you're saying it's better to go after the $20,000 guy and leave the $250 million guy alone because he paid back the loans. I just think that doesn't make any sense in terms of I want to get the state back as much money as possible. And it's a prosecutorial choice to go after the $250 million. Should they go after both? Yes, but $250 million, that's a lot of money to give up. At least that's what they're asking for. I don't know if they're going to get that.
Perhaps even more important than that is the disillusionment of the companies. The companies cease to exist. And also, Trump can't be on the board of directors of any company in New York ever. So those are some pretty serious penalties for future business opportunities, particularly if you're into real estate and you have a history of real estate in New York. It's going to hamper your ability to make further profits in the future. So, yeah.
Yes, and and again, the selective prosecution, and I always do love people who run on, I'm going after him. Didn't Alvin Bragg do that too? Isn't this a New York tradition?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think this is, if he wasn't Trump, would he be going through this? I don't think so. I honestly don't think so.
Speaking of our friend Alvin Bragg, Nate, I think you're covering a case with him now that somebody is going after Alvin Bragg for malicious prosecution or something like that. Some convenience store owner, something happened there? What's up with that?
So the bodega owner, which is true. The bodega, so not the bodega, the guy who worked, he was actually, so he goes into some customer comes into the store, some girlfriend of this guy comes into the store with their daughter and wants to buy some chips. She says, hey, it's not, let's not give up the chips because I think her EBT card, her welfare card wasn't scanned, wasn't taking off any money. So she goes back, gets the boyfriend. The boyfriend comes down, and instead of just coming and paying the 25 cents for the chips or 50 cents for the chips, he goes around the counter and starts beating up the guy. So the guy then takes out a knife, stabs him, and it was clearly self-defense. But because of the policies in the DA's office, if you're black and you're, something bad happens to you, we're automatically going to assume that you're in the right and other people are in the wrong. So that's what the guy's suing for, because he's like, you had the video, you had all this evidence, and you still prosecuted, not only charged me with murder, but forced me to stay in one of the worst prisons in America for how long? Like 6 days or something like that.
Also, isn't the bodega owner, shall we say, not white?
Yeah, he's not white.
Isn't he a POC? Isn't that the hip term now, POC?
Yeah. But it's a shame because, in New York,
not POC enough.
In New York, it's when you start prosecuting people based on like these, like everything we're talking about, I think is all in together. Prosecuting people based on political aspirations, that's wrong, right? So I am sympathetic to even with the Trump side saying, oh, this is wrong, even though I think on the documents it's clear. But I think it's wrong because if I was on a jury, I probably wouldn't convict just because I think she's doing this as a political motive. So I would do it just as a show of stopping that. It would be essentially jury nullification. There's no evidence that she'd be able to show me to convict him because I think the motive for his prosecution is wrong. And the same thing I think with these cases too, when it comes to these, if you're black, you're innocent cases, right? We have to start holding people accountable for the crimes they commit, not for the color of their skin. And I think that if we were to start to do that, then we wouldn't have these issues. But that's what they're trying to do. The police are racist, even though most of the police department is black. The prosecutors are racist. The crimes are racist. The people who run the cities are racist. And they're saying that in Baltimore, where everybody up and down the board are black. The people who run the cities is black. The police commissioners is black. 90% of the police department is black. But they're all racist. It's like, where does this stop? And I think that's the issue here. We have to stop trying to vilify people because they're not black. And then we have to stop trying to make these angels out of people who are black. Like the other day on my channel, I'm arguing with this guy because he's telling me that George Floyd was killed because he was black. And I'm like, all right, show me anywhere in the documents.
No one argued that.
I'm like, there's absolutely nothing in any document that said he was killed because he was. Matter of fact, if they could prove that. But you know what? That's the narrative, and people are going to believe that till the day they die. There's no way you can change anybody's view that George Floyd was killed because he was black, not because there was any evidence, just because people have said it and they believe it. Sorry about my long little rant.
No,
I watched the entire trial. It never came up once.
We watched. Yeah, nobody ever said he was killed because he was black. Nobody said that. No one said that.
Well, I forgot the term, Nate, but isn't it described as like, oh, you're black, but you have a inherited racism, or I forget. They have cute pet terms that they circle around and say, oh, but you've absorbed this because you're part of the system now. You suddenly magically turned white.
No, you know what? We live in a system, and I want to be very clear. We live in a system now that essentially is reverse racism, and it's funny because I would just say
racist.
No, it's a little bit
right. No, I don't like reversing. I like just racism.
It is racist.
Period.
But it's gotten so bad. So Facebook had this AI do a study on stuff on the platform to see if there was racism, how racist whether there was racism on the platform, and it came back like the people who are most the racism that is directed at which group the most happened to be against white people, and it was crazy because they were like, okay, this obviously it doesn't work for the narrative. And what I'm saying here now is we live in a world where, because I do videos on this all the time, we live in a world where if you're black and in Portland, you can walk into the Nike store, pull out whatever you want, walk out the store. They can't stop you. They can't prosecute you. And they'll let you go if they catch you. right?
More the point you used to be able to walk into the Nike store, but Nike recently announced it's closing the Nike store because of the crime problems. A la also Target, also a la Starbucks in San Francisco.
But now you have a coffee desert.
Are pulling out.
Now you got a coffee desert.
A lot of these companies are pulling out because the crimes aren't being prosecuted, because amazingly all this theft is somewhat harmful to the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so like all these the last grocery store in that part of DC where they were begging them to stay open. Begging them to stay open. It's like, but I can't stay open because of all the theft. And you guys aren't doing anything to stop the theft. So can you stop the theft? And they're like, no. It's like, well, then the store is going to close because it's at a loss. I literally can't keep it running.
I got a solution.
So,
if the community cares and they want it, go guard your damn stores. Because I'm over it. It's like, you know, we do have a Second Amendment. I think the community should go to the store and stop their neighbors from robbing.
And then you'll be like the bodega owner, right? Up on charges in jail.
Vote those son of a bitches out, by the way.
Yeah,
even if it's clear. Even if it's clear self-defense.
Well, vote those people out.
Well, how about Chicago? What about Chicago saying, why don't we just open up government-run grocery stores?
That's the end goal, by the way.
Yeah.
That is the end goal because the guy's a communist. And the mayor, literally,
the government's going to take a loss. Is that what the government's doing?
That's his
They're going to allow
position.
the theft at the store. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a step to get there. Think about it.
So the taxpayers are now just going to pay for unlimited free things for everybody. It seems like it's not going to work. Not going to be viable.
No, you know what? One thing I do love is that now these cities have to deal with the BS that they've been pushing for years, right?
I do enjoy that.
It's so amazing. Like it's like Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they were all
sanctuary.
Illegal immigration is great. Bring them all here. We don't care. Then now we want to close the border. Close the border.
Build the wall. The Biden wall. We're gonna have the Biden wall, folks.
Yeah, the Biden wall.
There was a great story this week where Bill Clinton was coming out against the open policies in New York because New York City passed a law of right of housing. They're like, everyone has a fundamental right to housing. We think housing is a fundamental moral right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then suddenly lots of illegal immigrants show up to New York and like, we'd like housing because it's a fundamental right. And even Bill Clinton came out this week and said, we need to change this. This was designed for New York's homeless. This was designed for New York's citizens. And now all these people are coming here and they're putting a strain on it. We can't provide housing for all these people. In New York, we don't have enough housing. What happened? Did you turn MAGA, Bill Clinton?
Hey,
I love stories like that. Also, on a similar vein, I think it was originally Washington or Seattle, but San Francisco has signed on. The state of California has signed on. I think Idaho recently signed on to a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court because the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals a couple of years ago basically said that you can't force homeless people off the streets.
Yes.
You can't force them off the streets. They have a right to be on the streets. Now, this makes no sense legally, by the way, because the streets belong to the public in a public way. When an individual person puts up a tent, it becomes private property, so it's no longer public. And the Ninth Circuit said you can't force them off the streets. And everyone at the time in San Francisco was like, this was a Ninth Circuit decision. So this was the law for the entire West Coast. At the time, a couple of years ago, they're like, oh, huzzah for the homeless. And now you have Oregon, Washington, Idaho, San Francisco, California, all petitioning the Supreme Court, begging them to overrule the Ninth Circuit, say, can we please force the homeless off our streets? We can't deal with it anymore. The schadenfreude is so very real.
But Kurt, all right, so that case referenced the previous Supreme Court case. It was a Skid Row case. I forget the name of the case, but essentially what the facts of this case was, a guy he had literally broken his leg and he was laying in the street, and the cops and the city had passed an ordinance saying that it was illegal to be homeless. Like it was essentially illegal to be homeless, not really living on the street, but illegal to be homeless. So the Supreme Court said you can't criminalize someone's status. So I can't criminalize you. So I can't criminalize you because you're a drug dealer. I can't criminalize you because you're an addict. I can criminalize you for drug use. I can't criminalize you for being homeless.
But we can move you.
But we can move you. Yes. Yeah. So the Ninth Circuit interpreted that Supreme Court precedent to say that, okay, well, they can't criminalize them being homeless. So that's why so if they're just staying on the street, then that's why they can do it. And that's why now Skid Row has become what it is, because they're saying, because the argument on the other side is, well, even though I'm homeless, that ordinance is criminalizing me for being homeless, not for actually what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, see, but that's where the Ninth Circuit lost the plot, because the Supreme Court's completely correct. You can't throw someone in jail because they're, a drug dealer. You can throw them in jail because they deal drugs. Yeah. There's a distinction. You throw them in jail for the act, not in the nature of who they are, because maybe there's a drug dealer out there who doesn't deal drugs because he's reformed. He's decided to stop doing that. And if he stopped doing that, then great. I would be a drug dealer, but I don't really want to go to jail. Fantastic. Then the rules have worked out as designed. We have successfully inhibited you from your crime. So,
or like trespassing would apply, right? Trespassing would apply, right, Kurt? So you're homeless. Right. I can't convict you, but you're trespassing on my property. Now Correct. I can, because you're doing this.
Yeah. I can't convict you. You're homeless. I can convict you because you've set up a tent and tried to convert the public into the private, which you can't do.
So so I think that's the issue now, is that broadening of that rule, because how does that affect? Because then you're saying, well, if you're sleeping on the streets, are you taking over that part of the public property for that amount of time? So I think is another fight.
I'm just noting that all these people cheered. They cheered in the streets when the Ninth Circuit came up with that decision. They're like, this is a great decision. We should not, the homeless are the homeless and they shouldn't be forced off the streets. And now they're begging. They're begging. Even the mayor of San Francisco, the board of supervisors was quoted recently. Yeah. When you're talking about like the illegal immigration, the board of supervisors of Chicago was quoted recently as saying how they can't deal with all this illegal immigration. Like, when did the mayor of New York City become MAGA? When did the board of supervisors of Chicago become MAGA? When did the attorney general of California and Idaho and Washington and the city attorney for San Francisco, when did they all turn MAGA? And like, oh geez, our policies have come to bit us in the ass. Not that anyone could have predicted that completely in advance. All the conservatives over here, like, we tried to tell you. We tried to warn you. It was all foreseeable.
There's a hero in this mix. And I've got to give credit where it's due. And two of you have him as a governor. Greg Abbott's little bus tickets started all this. And that was a brilliant move. That started the flow, in my opinion. That maneuver got them all to say, oh, yeah, why don't we go to New York? We're not going to get hassled there. Why don't we go to all these other places? And then they got to have a NIMBY
We're a sanctuary city. And now they're talking about a stay in Texas law.
Yeah.
They literally want to force this to be Texas's problem. Texas's proposal was, how about stay in Mexico? That's racist. How about stay in Texas? Like, Texas, like, how is this our problem?
No,
Have you heard of this one? The Airbnb squatter in California who demands $100K to vacate.
Yeah, that's it. They have those things in New York too, where the person essentially now can't get evicted. It's ridiculous. But like, even with this whole Texas thing, the whole Texas issue, I always think it's so wild, because most people don't realize this, but the majority of immigrants going to New York and Chicago and all that aren't going because they're being sent up to Texas. They're going because Texas sent them up. They're going on their own after they found out that New York has its right to shelter in Texas.
Right. Hey, Abbott showed them the way.
Yeah.
It was like that was the first influx, and then now they're there. That planted. It's kind of like, remember when they emptied the gangs in LA and managed to spread it across the nation, because they evicted everybody out of LA, and then all of a sudden you had gangs in Little Rock. You had them all over the place because they got booted out of LA. Well, that's kind of what he did with this quote migrant situation, I think.
Oh, somebody's 20 minutes behind. I love how Trump is responsible for the state's annual assessment of prop. I don't see why this is just so difficult to understand. He's not responsible, right? There was all right, so everybody understands exactly what happened, because sometimes you got to explain this out. Even Joe Rogan and everybody who keeps saying the property is worth millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. They forgot one simple part: is the property has a stipulation that it cannot be used as a home, right? So what they're comparing it to are homes. this property cannot be used as a home based on the deed. So the reason why this property was valued so low is because of the stipulation in the deed, the contractual requirement. So the tax assessor and the people who were appraising the value, the qualified appraisers, they said, well, because of this restriction that you can't use this as a home, you can only use this as a social club, that brought the value down. Now, if you could be using that, if you could use it as a home, the sky's the limit. But since you couldn't, that's what brought, and there was an easement and some other stuff that attached to the land. So that was the reason why the value was so low. But when they went to the bank, unfortunately, they valued it as if it was a home. So that's the difference. That's the difference, and that's where they're saying the fraud is. It's not in the fact that I think Joe Rogan and the rest of them are right. If this was able to be used as a single family home, sky's the limit. But it's specifically not able to be used in that manner.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal that everyone keeps missing.
Okay, well, what is its value as a business? And it is a resort, so there's a lot more.
Yeah, it's just, but again, it's just like with the liberals. Damn the facts when they're not good for my guy. It just is what it is. I understand that people. Hey, I had Trump derangement syndrome serious when he first ran. I thought he was a racist. I thought all that stuff. I know you guys aren't shocked. I hated the guy.
Some will argue you still do.
Yeah, but you know what? It's probably. I think the problem is my Trump derangement syndrome is lighter than the people who just agree with Trump, because I think the Trump derangement syndrome is looking at all the facts and just saying he's innocent for everything. I think that's worse Trump derangement syndrome. I think my derangement syndrome goes to a point where when they call Trump racist, I think that's bullshit. I think it's 100% Trump 10% bullshit. I think when they said Trump did a bad job as president, I think that's bullshit. I think you can't. The job he did with the economy, I give him so much credit. Lowest black unemployment rate. He did, and COVID's the only thing that really stopped him. So don't get me wrong. I had bought into the bullshit, but then I reversed course. I was wrong. But the thing is that I'm not buying into the other side's bullshit. Sometimes it's just wrong in the other way. So yes, there's Trump derangement syndrome on the left, but there's just as bad Trump derangement syndrome on the right. And I think this fraud case that's easily shown on the papers, I think exposes it on both sides.
The better example of that, at least in my humble opinion, is the classified documents case. Because I think you could certainly, at least to my mind, quibble or even outright disagree with elements of the judge's ruling in the business case. Now, I'm not sure that those matter that much in the end, because it's a series of things, right, that sort of proves the case. So even if you're able to attack elements of it, I'm not sure it necessarily drives the overall conclusion, but at least there you have a much better thing. The things people have been doing on my channel, in my chat, to try to say Trump is not guilty of the classified document case, the hoops they have tried to jump through and the contortions they've tried to do, it's truly a thing to behold. I mean, the man is caught on tape, basically being like, here is the classified document. I am showing you the classified document. I could have declassified it, but I didn't. It's still classified. I could get into a lot of trouble for showing this to you. Ha, ha, ha. I'm like, dude, man, it's like, what do you want me to do with this, So that's where I sort of laugh at the whole thing, because some of the contortions people are trying to go through to get him out of it are truly a thing to behold.
While we're talking about that, how many of you saw the loving video clip from Hillary Clinton, who recommends, shall we say, a way to deal with people who like Trump?
The same way to deal with.
What did she say? I missed this one.
The same to deal with her, the shit that she like. It's you know what? Don't let me be sort of here, because I think she's just as corrupt as Trump, if not even more so. But I love the way how people, when Trump said, "Oh, the election was bullshit, Biden is illegitimate, he's got to go to jail." But when she was out there saying that for all the 4 years that Trump was in, she's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
Did we forget she was saying he was an illegitimate president? He was, he had the Russia gate. He was impeached for this shit. But don't worry, we just gotta ignore that actually even happened. Right?
Denying the sanctity of the election is very bad, very, very bad. Yeah. Unless you're a Democrat, for sure.
I'm trying to find it, but the essence of it is that she recommends, in the end of the segment, that there probably needs to be some retraining or re-education.
Oh joy!
So she went straight to Mao. Straight to Mao. It's like, thank you, Hillary. Thank you for taking the mask off.
I appreciate you being more overt about it. That's kind of nice for a change.
Yeah.
Okay, so on a fun note, Steve, we talked a little bit earlier. There's a case coming up. I think this is the guy that Youngkin actually pardoned, who was disruptive at the Loudoun school board meeting and wound up getting arrested and charged
for daring to expose the Loudoun County School District about their malfeasance. Did you see where their superintendent recently got criminally convicted for firing a guy improperly? Yeah, that's how well it's going. When the superintendent gets criminally convicted for wrongful termination, you know it's going super duper well.
Yeah, that's not too well. It's not going too well.
So what's the case going now, Steve?
So his family has filed an action in federal court on behalf of their minor daughter, a Title IX action against the school board. And they're asking for $30 million or whatever, the court could decide for compensatory, et cetera, damages. But it's an aggressive move, and it's certainly, I think, a warranted if these laws are going to mean anything under the facts of this case, where she was assaulted at school by somebody who had prior behavior like that and then went on to assault someone else. But at the time she was assaulted and her parents found out about it, the school was much more concerned about no one thinking that they'd come back to yell at anybody and celebrating their no holds barred policy. Everybody do everything you want at school, whenever you want, however you want. We don't interfere with anything. And if boys want to be in girls' bathrooms, that's where they belong. And said there are no predators. Remember that in the school board? Oh, yeah. There are no predators. And had him arrested.
Not aware of, and that was what they got convicted of. Not aware of any problems. Not aware of any things. It's like, yeah, that was a lie. Jury finds that was a lie. Don't lie, people.
I'm sorry. I was queuing up. Go ahead. Keep going. I didn't mean to.
Yeah. So, of course, as Kurt's mentioned, this has been dismantled to some degree with some of the actions against some of the people involved in it, and criminal charges and perjury and whatnot. But that's a little bit of Northern Virginia for me, I'm afraid. How I feel about it is it's so adjacent to D.C. that they like to do things like this. And it was an example at that point, and I think a continuing one, of the use of power to preen and socially signify and virtue signal and putting on the altar of that a young girl who was brutally assaulted, and other girls too, and then pretending they didn't exist. And then anyone who would try to stand up for them, you would want to use police power to shut their voices down, knowing that you're lying. Okay. You can't say, well, our policy is overall good, but there are some predators. We need to deal with that. You can't say that. You can't admit there are any, because everything they want to take credit for, it has to be perfect. So they'd rather the victim of the assault suffer and be tormented and have her life change than the adults actually do anything about the consequences of their policy. So they're getting some feedback from that, from the grand jury up there and law enforcement, as well as this civil action. Good.
You know what? It reminds me of, it's not that different than the stores leaving town, right? Yeah. Your own policies and your own narrative that you are so dedicated to maintaining, well, guess what? It has to be solved one way or another. So somehow it has to work itself out. And I think that's fantastic. I did find the clip from Hillary here.
Let's see what they said.
Very strong partisans in both parties in the past. And we had very bitter battles over all kinds of things, gun control and climate change and the economy and taxes. But there wasn't this little tail of extremism wagging the dog of the Republican Party as it is today. Mm-hmm. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen. And how do you very strong really partisans in both?
Formal deprogramming.
Yeah.
And she was the one literally running the whole Russia narrative for like 2 years, right? And after they found there's no evidence, it was all bullshit, she still was like, he's an illegitimate president, Russia. It's like, but you know what though? This is what happens when you don't believe the facts, because you got a whole bunch of Democrats who will say the whole thing is true, it was honest, and they don't. But there's not a damn piece of evidence you're going to show them that was all BS. Nothing, right? You're going to go. You can look at YouTube channels here; they're going to say that. And I think it's the same on the Trump side. I think we've gotten to that point where evidence be damned. People are going to. The reason why she's on CNN, because people are going to believe that shit. There are people who are going to believe that bullshit. Crazy.
I do remember that quote somebody just was talking about. Remember that when she was in front of, what does it matter? They're dead.
Yeah, what difference at this point does it make?
I don't remember the antecedent reference.
Was that her list?
Benghazi.
Benghazi. That's right.
Benghazi.
That's right.
Benghazi. Yeah.
When she was at the hearing for that, and they kept asking her about it, and she said, "What difference at this point does it make?"
That's right.
I think is what she said.
Yeah.
I don't remember that one, but that sounds bad.
That's pretty bad. Yeah.
Well, I mean, she's about as awful as they get. So, okay, Nate, what case do you have? I haven't done my homework. What case do you have going right now that you're covering or following?
Oh no, I'm just doing all.
The Safe. I don't know how to say his name. Is it Safe or Safe?
Oh, you're talking about yeah. The kid from Yale. The kid from Yale.
Yeah.
You know what? It probably Uncivil is better on the facts with this one now. So,
Kurt,
which case? Save
the Saif, the Yale rape student.
Saif. Oh yeah, sure. So Saif was dismissed by Yale. He was initially suspended, and then he was expelled over allegations that he had committed a sexual assault during his time at Yale. He was criminally charged, but he was found not guilty. And he is now suing the university for violation of his rights. And Yale had initially claimed that they were immune from suit because they had heard the complaint in a quasi-judicial proceeding, which as a initial legal theory makes sense. You know, when you say things in court, you can't, for example, charge defamation because it would just lead to endless lawsuits. So we have this idea of immunity within the confines of a lawsuit, and that can extend beyond a court proceeding into the quasi-court proceedings. For example, an administrative hearing held by a university as to whether or not to expel somebody. So the Court of Appeals sent a certified question to the Connecticut Supreme Court to ask them whether or not Yale's proceedings were sufficiently protective of Saif's rights in order to grant immunity. And the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled unanimously no. The Connecticut Supreme Court unanimously said Yale failed so horrifically in the protection of this guy's rights that they don't get any protection because it wasn't, in fact, quasi-judicial. They didn't, him and his attorney were in a separate room. They were not permitted to, the witnesses were not under oath. They weren't permitted to ask cross-examination or otherwise participate in the hearing. So as the Connecticut Supreme Court wrote in pertinent part, his lawyer had been turned into a proverbial potted plant. And now, because they screwed it up so hard, both him and the woman who initially filed the complaint are now being sued in court. And that is where that whole thing is proceeding. It was a true abomination. And as I sort of, remark, it's too bad that Yale doesn't have a law school at it. Because if they did have a law school, presumably the law school would have been able to help them create a proceeding that would have been in compliance with, basic judicial guarantees. But sadly, Yale apparently does not have a law school that was able to advise them. So, yeah, that's where that's all at.
Question on this. If they did this with him, have they done something similar with other people? Is there a potential of a precedent here, not only for Yale, but how about Harvard? Do they do anything similar? Because I have heard of this kind of behavior on behalf of these institutions where they're so, I'll just say woke or whatever, they're so driven by a narrative they don't care. Could this not be an unraveling of these universities? I mean, could potentially other people start suing left and right, which I would never encourage people to sue stupid ass universities or anything like that. But
well, I just,
it's not even the first, because there were cases of at least superficially comparable fact patterns. I believe I've covered cases similar to this out of, I believe, the University of Colorado Boulder. I covered one, and one out of Arizona State. I think I covered one time. And so there's been a couple cases like this where they've found these to be so woefully deficient. So you're absolutely right that these lawsuits are going. And it's interesting, incidentally, because anytime I cover a Title IX case on my channel where the woman is the one winning, which it does occasionally happen, well, it happens more often than not, probably. The woman wins a case for Title IX. I cover it. YouTube has no problem with that. I cover a case where the guy wins the Title IX case. YouTube demonetized the shit out of me. They hate that shit. So I've covered various versions of Title IX cases where the guy's the one suing and wins, usually in some panoply of comparably horrible facts, because it usually takes quite a lot for the guy to win, as I'm sure you appreciate. So every time the guy wins, pretty much invariably, it's some sort of horror show. And amazingly, YouTube doesn't want me to bring that to light. So there's that.
Well, one thing about what Eric just mentioned is that, yes, when I worked for the university and we even met through Saif, there were some other gentlemen who have had this same issue happen, and they sued. But during your settlement, the reason why you don't hear about them is because when they settle, part of the settlement is everybody keep their mouth shut, and no one can talk about how much you got, blah, 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 blah. So yes, there are a lot of men who have gotten money suing these schools about the same issue, about this whole thing. But because of the settlements, they can't talk about it. So, like the guy's driving a Ferrari now, that type of thing. But
Lamborghini, I believe it was more specifically, but yes.
But he can't talk about how much he got or what happened because, that's the, he doesn't want to have to give the money back. So yes, this is happening and they are paying.
What bothers me though is, because it seems to keep happening, are they just paying and just saying this is the cost of doing business because we're going to keep these policies intact because people like it or it's our particular narrative versus actually, isn't the purpose of a lawsuit? Now, maybe I'm dumb. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer here, but I thought the purpose of it was to change behavior. If a school gets nailed on something like this, one would think they would be like, okay, we've got to rewrite these policies so as to not break the law or to take somebody's rights away. Is that actually happening, or are they just saying, okay, we'll pay him off, it's a Lamborghini, we can screw over 5,000 other people, and it's cost of doing business?
Well, I think every lawyer here on the panel would know, it's like, if your client, if they're going to pay the money and say just keep your mouth shut, then okay, it all depends on how much you're talking about, right? Because even when I was talking about the Dominion lawsuit for Fox News, if you're suing for $1 billion and they say, well, we'll give you 800 million, that's a great deal. You tell your client, yeah, let's take that deal and get the hell out of here, right? You get like 50 cents on the dollar here. So I think a lot of these guys, if the school is saying we'll give you $1 million, just keep your mouth shut. The goal of the lawsuit is to make you whole, right? And a lot of times, like this Saif, he wants the cash. He has like a bigger moral objective. But generally, clients, lawyers want to get paid, clients want to get paid. I don't know, I know Steve does a lot of work in civil, but Steve, if your client can get 75 cents on the dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, are you, is that generally let's really consider that deal, or is it kind of like, we want the whole thing and
yeah, I mean, if you're the plaintiff's lawyer, the primary behavior you want to change is the check writing behavior in favor of you and your client, and a lot of times, of course, people come in with the dual situation of morality and money, but as the money offer goes up, along with it sometimes comes, also, we really regret this. And you start believing in the sincerity of that regret as that number climbs higher, right? Like that we're sorry card with the big check in it. You're like, I think we've accomplished what we set out to do here. And that's good enough for me. That's almost how it always works.
But it bothers me. And again, maybe I'm Pollyanna, but shouldn't there be some degree of behavioral modification over time?
Yeah, if it's bad enough. You have to pay enough.
Yeah, that depends on how much you can afford. The deeper your pockets, the less worried you are about changing what you have to do. Right? It's just like, okay, I'll just pay. I'll pay this. It's like Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld, he doesn't care about parking, right? He cares nothing about it. He parks everywhere and they give him a ticket, or he takes the ticket and he pays it, right? He's like, because I don't care. It's not going to change my behavior. I park wherever I want. But someone like me, that matters, having my car towed and paying parking tickets, it's going to change my behavior.
Now, I would think what they would first do is try to figure out how can we look like we're giving a fair process here so that we can beat these suits, but not actually do it. How do we give the appearance of being fair without catering to these predators that we all know we instantly know they are. We don't need a hearing. We don't need evidence. We don't need cross-examination. We already know they're guilty. And it's terrible that they might be able to do something about it if the court thinks they're right. How do we create a process that meets the standards?
I don't know. I just find it so troubling. I mean, I have trouble recommending anybody go to a lot of the different schools. Now, not every school's that way. I'm sure that, a lot of state schools are probably a bit more mellow or not as extreme, but I don't know. I find it sad. This super chat, I think, is a great subject, talking about a similar deal about, who's using the bathrooms. This is where the rubber hits the road for real. You have a lot of inmates who are claiming to be of the opposite gender. They move them in with the general population of the gender, and somehow biology is different from what they're saying. So while they're saying that they're female, somehow they're able to reproduce with a biological female and get them pregnant, and other things are happening. You guys have any thoughts on this?
It speaks for itself, really.
Yeah, it's and I know people are going to be hating on me because now all of a sudden, on one end, I'm a left-wing lunatic, and now I'm going to become a right-wing lunatic all of a sudden because I kind of like facts and evidence. But this whole thing with the whole, a biological man, if you want me to call you a female feminine name, if you want to, I'm okay with that. But why do you have to compete against women in women's sports knowing you have a biological advantage, right? I think we have the social reality of someone respecting your what you want to be called and how you want to look. That's fine. But then you have the reality of that you're just not a biological woman, you're a biological male. And I think that reality is now what's coming to head, because they just recently did a poll. It's not like 70% of Americans think that if you're a biological man, and even though if you identify as a woman, you should not be able to compete against women because of the obvious differences in the way men and women are built.
What obvious differences, Nate? Men and women are exactly the same in every possible way. In fact, the term men and women is completely
it's arbitrary now. And
there's no difference.
Stuff. Like biology matters. Biology matters, right? It's like But I think this is what happens, is that we're getting to a point where it's not about the truth of what happens. That's what happens with this immigration. All the stuff that we're talking about, especially with these conservative stuff, it's all about, you have conservatives saying, here's the truth of the matter. Biology is a fact, right? The immigration issue is a fact. Here are the facts, right? And then you have the other side saying, but how do you feel about it? How do you feel? How does it make you feel? Like this guy that just got unfortunately, deleted in New York, right? And the girlfriend doesn't want to tell the cops that the person that stabbed the boyfriend is black. It's like, are we at this point now where it's all about your feelings? Because I think facts still matter. And, we got a whole segment of the population who think facts are subjective based on your feelings. And I think that's the problem.
I'll propose a compromise. If, let's say, they have gone through a procedure and limit and reverse their plumbing, I'm okay. They can go in. What do you guys think?
And play and fight against women, or are you talking about
No. They could be housed with women if they've gone all the way through and they've done a complete surgery. Where shall we say it's actually physically impossible for them to impregnate a person because they don't have the plumbing any longer. I'm okay if they put them with the women. What
about the emotional feelings, Eric? What about the ones who feel like a woman, who you put them in with men and they're not going to, it's the feelings, Eric. You're not understanding The feelings.
No, I'm saying that they can invest in their feelings, and again, if they want to continue and with their feelings find a way to complete themselves.
The problem with pretending for other people is you have a violent man who's been violent against women. He goes to jail, and you say, well, bad news. You're not going to be around with any more women to abuse or harass or attack anymore. It's terrible news for you. And he goes, well, if I say I'm a woman, then you'll just stick me over there with the women, right? Well, of course, because we will pretend that, right? The level of pretending increases. So now you're going to pretend this guy isn't the violent man anymore, but now he's a woman and he can be around these women and attack them or have relations.
Why can't you just identify as free and save yourself a lot of steps?
This identify as something. It's honestly ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Just imagine you go back 10. It's like, what has the world come to? You go back 10 years. You're like, I'm a he, I'm a she, I'm they, I'm them, I'm it. It's like, what the hell's going on, right? There's got to be some objective reality that we can all agree to. Men are, XY, women are XX. Like, but now it's
objective reality we can all agree to. I don't know about that, Nate. That seems controversial.
Yeah, it's a controversial.
Anyway, those who are criticizing me, I guess what I'm putting out there is I'm sort of challenging or daring people to prove how committed they really are in that. Obviously, I would argue, and
you're willing to chop off your balls within. I guess you're cool with us, that kind of thing.
No, more than that. It is quite literally more than that. So, and I have a funny feeling that those who are claiming to be will not line up to have that done. That's all.
But I do want to say this though. I don't know if everybody on the panel agrees with me, but I'm definitely going to say it. I don't care what if you're an adult, no, that makes it very clear. Children, I think we're in a whole nother explosion there, right? I think children are a whole different set, making fundamental changes to their physiology before they can have the mental capacity to really determine if that's, like they have this video on YouTube, the youngest transgender where they're changing a kid at like 5 years old. I think that's kind of ridiculous. But no, I think that is ridiculous. Not even kind of, I think that is ridiculous. But I think if you're an adult and you want to do this, and you make that positive choice to do that, and you want me to call you whatever, some people don't want to do it, right? But I'm saying it's my choice to say, yes, I'll call you miss. I'll do whatever, in that particular way. But I also don't think you should force to other people who may say, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to call you miss. I don't think they should be penalized because they don't want to do it, right? I believe in freedom, and I believe you should be free to do whatever you want. And I will do exactly what you want me to do and call you miss this, but I don't think you should compete with women. And I don't think that you should force other people to buy into it. If someone says, I just don't agree with this and I don't want to do it, fine, but it's their right to do it. And I think that's the problem. I think nowadays you have one set of people who want to force people to do certain things like that. And that's Jordan Peterson, right? Why should you force me to call you a woman if I don't want to do that, right? I thought we had freedom of speech. And that's what I believe. Yeah.
Well, that was a mistake right there. Thinking you had freedom of speech in Canada. You see what they're doing when it comes to podcasts and stuff? And if you make more than $10 million, we want access to all your financials, and we want to make sure if it's Canadian, and we'll determine for you what makes it Canadian. It's not enough that it's filmed in Canada by Canadians, by the way. That's not what makes it Canadian, apparently. So what makes it Canadian, I guess, is if you spread the message.
My favorite thing, though, is that's kind of been around for a long time. How many of you have heard of Bob and Doug McKenzie from SCTV? Oh, you got to be kidding me. They're the two hosers, one who has a cap on, and they're like, oh my God, I guess I'm showing my age. Anyway, Bob and Doug McKenzie are a send-up of Canadians. They both wear toques, and they're essentially stoners, losers, types. And SCTV, because it was out of Canada, had to give X amount of time for Canadian broadcasting. So they did two characters that were the worst stereotypes of Canadians out there to meet the federal requirement. You guys should look it up. I mean, it's actually hilarious. But Rick Moranis is one of the two.
Ooh, really? That's fun.
I like Rick Moranis.
Oh, is it Rick Moranis or wait, Austin Powers? Was the
Mike Myers?
Oh, Mike Myers.
Mike Myers. I'd have to look up. It's a couple of those, but Strange Brew was a movie. But Dave Thomas, yes, Dave Thomas. Okay, and they're not stoners, but they drank a lot of beer. What I'm trying to say is that they represented, every bad stereotype of that. And I totally, totally love Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis. Great stuff. Look it up. It's a good way to handle it. As far as that goes, I do think our friend David, if he gets any larger, he might have escaped just in time.
Yeah. The Gestapo. Weren't they up there just saluting people who fought for the SS recently?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good moment. That was a little whoopsie doopsies. Let's honor this World War II veteran who fought for the Waffen SS. Great. Fantastic.
And even worse, Poland is trying to extradite him now.
I would think.
War criminals, they should be extradited.
Oh, there he is. Okay, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But what I love about it, though, is typical Trudeau. He got the Speaker of the House to resign over it.
Yeah.
It's like find other people to fall on their sword.
Somebody had to take the fall for that one, though. Somebody had to go down, like
Mr. Blackface himself couldn't, obviously.
Let's put this together. Somebody who fought against the Russians. Who did the Russians fight with? They were on our side, right? They were on our side. So if they fought against the Russians, that means they were on the other side. And somebody just didn't put two and two together. Somebody just didn't put two and two together. So I was like,
well, there was a 60-minute piece that was shared out on Twitter. You might find clips where Justin's father, Pierre, talked about SS people were welcome because they were definitely not communist.
Well,
in the 80s.
If we're talking about context in World War II, the Ukrainians have always hated the Russians. So they did see the Germans as liberators of Ukraine against the Russian occupation.
Well, Ukraine. There were some people in Ukraine didn't like them. It didn't do very well.
Of course, there's going to be people, but no, there are video of the German troops going into Ukraine, and they were held on the streets as liberators of Ukraine. So they've always had this kind of bad blood. But again, and I think this guy got caught up because he joined up with them and started fighting against and doing all the horrible things. But in context, though, the Ukrainians saw the Germans as liberators. It just is what it is. That's facts.
Yes. There was a great book. I forgot the author. I hate it when I forget the book and the name, but I was reading it. It's really tragic. It talks about that period of when the Germans came in, and then they pulled. Apparently, I think it was during Peter the Great's time or whatever. A lot of Germans actually migrated into Ukraine to establish crops and things like that. And Hitler had the idea of going to Ukraine to find pure Aryans who are in Ukraine, kind of like the lost colony of the Germans, what have you. But it got really dark because they took them and they moved them out, and they were poor, they were terrible, lice ridden, and they had all these used clothes that were available for them, and they don't know where those clothes came from. Anyway, it's a very dark book.
But I will say this: Ukraine was between a rock and a hard place. You got the Iron Curtain with Stalin on one side, and you got the Germans on the other side. It's like, who do we pick? It's like both sides are monstrously horrible. So it's kind of like, but I think they put their, they picked the wrong horse.
All right, I've got some super chats that somehow snuck in here. I didn't see. I don't do that, Nate. Why do you allow other people to determine truth for you? So much for facts, logic, and truth. I wish I knew the reference.
They were talking about when I was talking about the how each side doesn't the truth. I understand. I know where this is coming. This is not. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't let people determine what truth is for me. That's why I'm sitting here arguing with the chat like 90% of the time, right? The chat's, Nate, we hate Nate, because I don't give a damn about people's opinions. I just care about the facts. And if the facts lead me one way, it is. If they lead me another way, it is.
Yep. Okay. And I agree that children should be protected and no one should suffer what this girl did, regardless of bathrooms and genders. School failed. I think everybody would definitely agree on that. I haven't seen him here for a while. What's up, man?
Rob.
I do have.
How you guys doing?
All right, man. I do actually have a question, because have you guys heard Barnes's opinion on banning of treatment, with kids, the gender affirming treatment, whatever, where he's actually against the banning of it, which is very surprising because Barnes is pretty conservative. His angle is interesting, though, because he said, I don't want to get into determining what the parents can determine for medicating their children and things. However, his solution is change the laws to where the children have the ability to sue both their parents and the people performing the procedures as an adult. And that'll clear that problem right up. And
I don't know,
that was
because
interesting.
Because, if we go that route, where does it stop? Do we allow parents to have their children's arms cut off? And then so you can sue them when you're getting an adult, something like that. I think it gets to the point where, I think there's a limit. And I think I'm trying to figure out what the limit. Maybe this is the limit. Maybe it's not. But I think.
Well, this is a hard one because it gets into a lot of the religious stuff. Now, we're talking about parents determining to do treatment. Well, what about the parents who say, no, you can't give my child a blood transfusion? And that child's going to die.
Oh,
and that's
I see where we're going with this.
No. That's what I'm saying. It does get a little bit
Parents
more
and treatment.
Right. I mean, it is a question. I do think his suggestion is at least worth exploring on a thought experiment out.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I know in some states, parents have the right to go to a certain point, but when it comes to the best interest of the child, where you're talking about life and death, then the state's interest in protecting that child. So even in the situation that you're talking about right now about not giving blood, even against the religious, they'll still do it because now it's out of the parents' hands. They're not going to let the child die. I know in New York they have some issues like that, but that's generally the law.
What happens to those children too? It's a tragedy. A lot of times they are. I'm trying to think of the term, but they're shunned. They're removed from their community, removed from their family, everything they know. And it is a horrible tragedy, but I think everybody should look into everything that does happen with that. And Rob, you do some of the family law.
Rob is our expert. He knows all.
Oh,
I think Rob does family law, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I think Rob does family law. I know I've had one.
Can you hear us, Rob?
Yeah,
but it wasn't.
I do domestic relations.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
I'm having stream issues. Let me jump out, then jump back in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've had
the
one
technology
case.
has failed us once again.
I think
Screw you, technology.
But it wasn't. I'm not sure if it was blood transfusion. It was something like that. But the child's life was like in the balance, and it was kind of like no.
Well, there's that case right now, and isn't Rob talking about it? Where the girl had the diagnosis of constant pain and stuff, and her parents wanted her on ketamine, and she went to the hospital. And
then Maya.
Yeah, and then the mother ended up committing suicide. So
it's pretty messed up little fact pattern over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Somebody's saying, should kids be able to sue their parents and priests for them getting a circumcision? I don't know.
But that's what I'm saying.
We need Joe here for that.
But again, this context. I think context. I think the more extreme you get, the more, because we're talking about life-altering, life-changing things that may have, something, cutting off somebody's arm is different than maybe a circumcision, that type of thing. And I don't know. I think it's all context. I think you can't have.
It's like, a little foreskin versus a forearm.
That it makes sense. That may So, but again, it's context is. In law, there are very few hard and fast rules that you can, because that's why we have courts and judges. This makes sense, but this doesn't make sense.
I hope that people comment below on the Barnes question and all that, because I think there is some nuance in there. I definitely look forward to seeing comments on what people think. Is it completely outlandish? Do you just automatically make it illegal or not? Because I had never thought of it. My initial stance was automatically, ban it. Don't screw with the kids, and I don't like them screwing with the kids. So that's my first instinct. The Barnes thought experiment was the first time I gave it any thought of going another way. And I would like to think that the children who had the decision made for them already could sue now. I hope so. Maybe, and that would just maybe clean it all up too, because there are some real tragedies of young people who are now adults and their lives are forever transformed. They can't do anything about it. It's a tattoo. You can't legally get a tattoo when you're too young, right? But at least that one can be removed.
I think one of the ways to potentially address Barnes's question is by separating the question into two parts, where things the state forbids you from doing and things the state might require you to do. So, for example, whether or not you can force a child to undergo care despite what their parents want, right? That would be into that category of what the state is forcing you to do, versus what the state is forbidding you from doing. I will simply note that even as a full-blooded adult, I do not have complete autonomy when it comes to medicine for myself. I do not have the ability to just get whatever medical procedures I want, because the state has determined, I think at least partially, in many cases correctly, that certain treatments should not be offered or allowed because they are not good. And the idea that the state has the ability to regulate the practice of medicine from first principles is well established, because it falls into the government's general power to do stuff, what we call police power, the ability to regulate medicine. So, for example, I would be in favor of a law that would forbid an adult from having a voluntary amputation in a case where there's nothing wrong with their limb, right? This is just they want to have an arm cut off because they do, which some people have that. They have
blinding. I think there's some people.
So it's like I would be in favor of laws that would prevent that, because it's like there is no reasonable person, right? The reasonable man test, as always, to the rescue, right? No reasonable man would make this choice. So you must not be a reasonable man. And therefore, because you're not a reasonable man, we do not have to respect your choice, because it's not within the province of the reasonable decision maker. So I think I'm in favor of that. How about that for an answer?
I don't know. It's an interesting answer. I do want to get these. I just saw one leader made a deal with every power in World War II, Joseph Stalin.
Oh, yeah.
True. A lot of deals were made. They weren't all followed. And then the only difference between Stalin and Hitler is who they thought the Jews were.
I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. Stalin was just kind of a brutalist person.
Those gulags.
Indiscriminate. Yeah, well, the gulags.
Well, he picked on Ukraine more than others. It was more regional than versus an ethnic thing, I think.
Yeah. Political. It's political, regional versus ethnic.
It was kind of like going after New York versus going after a particular type of population, in a sense.
But Stalin has a high body count too, though. So
he has a higher one.
Stalin is a monster. Mao is the biggest monster.
Mao's the
biggest monster.
50 to 100 million people dead.
I don't even know. Yeah.
You know what? It's interesting because most people during World War II forget that the ethnic people who were killed the most were Russians. Russians lost the most amount of people.
Nice hat, Legal Vices. I see you're up in your hat game.
What did I miss?
All over the place. We're talking about trans policies and prisons and
Stalin
schools and Stalin. And Hitler, all the good,
the Canadian Parliament too, right?
That's what spun this off. That's right. Wow. All right, so Jeff, you're here just in time.
In time.
Yeah, well, you were tweeting something earlier. Was it Melly case or Nelly case?
Oh my gosh, the YNW Melly trial is off the freaking hook. I have never seen a pre-trial motion conference like this.
What happened?
No, this is a motion to recuse the entire prosecutor's office. What? Because it turns out that the lead investigator is accused of Brady violations that were approved up to the highest levels of the public prosecutor's office. Good. I mean, to the point where the lead detective was illegally serving a search warrant on the defendant's mother's cell phone in a room, and he wanted to cover his ass. So what he did is he told an officer who was outside of the room to testify that he was actually in the room at the time the search warrant was served. This is the lead detective on the case. And it was so bad that the public prosecutor who was in the room at the time is now testifying for the defense in a motion to have the public prosecutor's office recused, saying that she will never work with that lead detective again, ever on another case, because he has demonstrated his willingness to falsify evidence in a capital murder case.
Well, hold on. All right, so maybe I'm missing the Brady. I'm missing the Brady violation part of this. So because I see the suppression, obviously the suppression, but what's the Brady violation?
The Brady violation is that they illegally served this, and the the detective asked another officer to lie about the fact that he was in the room, and they didn't disclose the fact that this piece of evidence that would impeach the lead detective and therefore be advantageous to the defendant was not disclosed for 11 months.
Oof.
And during that 11 months, the entire first trial took place. And this is all before lunch. They're coming back again now. It's insane.
I thought you said that the prosecutor is having to testify on behalf of the defense. Did I hear that?
And she is willingly doing it. She is throwing her entire office.
Shouldn't they just toss this damn case or drop these charges for now to re-prosecute later? I mean,
I've had that happen. That happened at the Bronx DA. What happens is that sometimes if the police do something wrong and the prosecutor's involved, they'll have the prosecutor in a motion hearing go up and testify about what happened. Yeah, so it's possible to happen. And generally, but it sounded like there's more suppression. But if it's indicative of his guilt or innocence, then because it seems like maybe the evidence they got may have been cleared or something like that.
So there's no jury yet. They're not to the jury phase yet.
No, they're scheduled to start jury selection on Monday. They filed this motion to recuse the entire prosecutor's office and a motion to dismiss with prejudice.
That's where I think that's where I think that would be that's the fire.
And the defense lawyer has accused I guess like each district has their own elected head of the prosecutor's office in Florida. The defense lawyer flat out accused the state's prosecutor for Broward County of committing a felony in hiding this illegal act of I mean, it is crazy. I've never seen anything like this in my life, which is why I was extremely late to be here.
Wow.
No, that is bonkers.
So,
that's crazy. Yeah.
What is the recourse? What's going to happen, or what should happen?
Suppression, number one. That evidence should definitely be suppressed.
Whatever, and it is the evidence. I mean, what's going to happen is during the retrial, they're going to put the lead detective on the trial. First question is, have you ever asked another police officer to lie and falsify evidence in a trial?
But he takes the fifth. That's what he'll do. He'll do affirming. I take the fifth, and then you get nothing. And
the second question is, are you aware that one of these prosecutors sitting over here has publicly stated under oath that they will never work with you ever again on a trial because you have shown a propensity to falsify evidence in capital murder cases?
But I don't think you get to that. But I don't think you get to that question. As soon as he takes the fifth, you can't ask him anything else, right? I'm taking the fifth.
Well, you can ask him another question, and he can plead the fifth to that question.
So, all right, because I don't know. Maybe it works differently. Because for us, if somebody says I'm taking the fifth, right? They don't even put you up there because like if you're just going to take the fifth, and because the questions then become like so. But I don't know. But maybe in different jurisdictions they'll allow you to at least ask because the questions could be damning, right? Have you ever planted evidence? I'll take the fifth because the fifth is not saying you did it or didn't. It's just So I don't know unless you get a negative inference based on the fifth. But I thought that was only in civil cases, not in criminal cases.
Well, being a little different though, because the defendant has a constitutional right here, right? And he's the one who wants to call this detective, right? Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't really be a negative inference against
the defendant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you're probably right. They probably can put him up. He takes the fifth, and then if he does take the fifth, a negative inference against the state, not the defendant.
I mean, it's a complete crap show, and we haven't even got started. I've honest to God never seen anything like this in my life. I just thought it would be a 30-minute hearing.
Why is this cop still working? I mean, I'm just like,
well, he's under. Well, see, that was the thing. This woman who happened to be in the room when all this went down. She has worked in the prosecutor's office for 20 years in the office that investigates misconduct on the part of public officials. She just happened to be the one that was in the room at the time. So she's sort of the lawyer's IA person. So it could get ugly. And she is eager to throw them all under the bus.
Well, yeah,
Ooh.
because I think her license may be even on the line too, right? This is got
Yeah.
some serious ethics about, especially if you say she's in the room. So,
Well, the
you got
first thing
ethics
is
violations. You got 11 months. It's not good. It's not good.
And the first thing is they had this hearing scheduled for today, and neither she nor the lead prosecutor in the first trial showed up, although that they had been subpoenaed. And the judge was pissed.
Yeah.
And he said, we are going to take a recess. I can't understand why they're not here when it's their very conduct that is the focus of this motion. You find them and get them here. And sure enough, within 15 minutes, both of the women were standing there in court.
That's horrible. That's so embarrassing too.
But how can
Subpoena
this
was not optional. I appreciate that. Get them here. Bench warrant.
if the entire investigation or prosecutorial team is compromised because of this? I mean, how do you bring a case? I'm very confused.
Well, you could theoretically, like I know in Cook County, in some places like in Illinois, what they do is they have acting prosecutors, so you can have like a private attorney appointed by a judge, and they'll instill that person as the office of the prosecutor just for that particular case. This famous cases happened with Jesse Smollett. It was a public attorney, David Webb. He wasn't from the prosecutor's office, but the judge instilled him as the office of the prosecutor, and he was able to prosecute Jesse Smollett with all that, the power of the prosecutor's office. So that's generally what they would do.
They could change the venue as well, I guess, to another district.
But then what are you charging with if like all the facts are through? You know, I keep thinking fruit of the poison.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
You can still charge them, but it's going to look real ugly as soon as cross-examination starts.
Yeah, because you have all these weaknesses in your case.
And this guy is wrecked going forward with Giglio notices and stuff. So who's going?
Giglio's, but yeah.
That was the two things they mentioned in the motion to dismiss was Brady and Giglio.
Yeah.
What is Giglio? What is that one? Could somebody explain that case?
So typically where you'll see it come up is, let's say you have a police officer like what Jeff's talking about that has had something that could compromise a bias, an interest, or an impeachment thing, like they lied in the past or something like that. That's exculpatory, right? So theoretically, that's kind of a Brady thing. So if this guy were to go investigate the next case, the DA should let the defense know this guy has an ethics problem. He likes to lie about evidence and stuff. So how much do you want him working on your next case? Because you're going to have to let the defense know the shenanigans this person has done if there's good cause to believe he did it. And then you get put on a list with your department and with DA offices. I mean, they keep a list in this state, right? And so the DAs know if these officers have these issues, and some are bad enough that they shouldn't work anymore. Maybe some aren't, but this one, if it's true, boy, this is terrible.
And he is the subject of an internal affairs investigation ongoing. And I mean, it just doesn't go to this. It goes to every investigation he's been involved in the past.
Sure does.
Well, one thing devastating.
One thing interesting about Giglio, though, is that the prosecutor doesn't have to turn it over until the day before trial, though. It's the Brady you have to turn over immediately, so you can play with Giglio evidence a little bit, but you don't have to. It doesn't have to be right when you find it. You can kind of wait until the eve of trial and turn it over.
Now, I will say on some of these, prominent cases right now, like Koberger and Sarah Boone, there have been Giglio notices in both of those. So at least you could say for the state, well, they're telling it early, right? Which probably means it's not so central to the case, right? Hopefully, at least. But
yeah, you can give notice that you have it, but you don't have to give it actually over. Yeah.
I've seen it in both of those so far.
Probably don't want to play games in a death penalty case because that tends to not go well. You want to play that very, very clean.
Trial by ambush. Yeah, you don't want to do trial by ambush.
I'm concerned that there's that many of these around that they have to. How are these guys on the job?
No, but like for instance, when I was a prosecutor, we used to get so where every cop that was a key witness, the arrest or the investigator, they literally it comes in a package. So like for instance, I had one cop who had said that I forgot he was being investigated for a fake placard or something like that. But they bring that to you and say, or they'll say, has this person ever been, departmentally had a department violation for something? So you would give, so they would give you that package within your prosecution package, and then you would turn over that discovery to the defendant, so they'll know, okay, this guy had a problem with this. But if you get lies and stuff like that, then that becomes even more, then you're getting more into Brady, where if the guy's a liar, and that's something you got kind of forced to turn over early so they can know, all right, your star witness is a freaking liar on the stand. Yeah, so.
Wow. Okay. Well, happy note.
So that's what I'm up to.
Yeah,
that's pretty big there.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to check that out.
I just thought it would be like a 30-minute just typical motion hearing where they go, yeah, okay, thanks for the motion, denied, let's go to trial. And now they're like, let's take a lunch break and we'll come back and have the next witness.
I guess that's why it's worth watching every time, is for these wild ones.
Yeah, the judge, it's crazy because the appeals, because the judge knows they're probably going to run one. If he rules against the state, they're definitely going up for appeal. But then it's like, how
this new public. I mean, he's a private defense. This new defense lawyer is awesome. This guy is zealously advocating for his client. At one point, he confronted the judge. Well, Your Honor, I can tell by the way you're sitting there with your arms folded and the smirk on your face that you think we, the defense, have done something wrong. And he said, no, I'm taking this very, very seriously. And then he railed on the prosecutor. It was like the big dog, yells at nips at the medium-sized dog. So the medium-sized dog takes it out on the little chihuahuas. The judge said, oh, I'm taking this very seriously, and proceeded to just yell at the prosecutors. It was wild.
Wow. Good. Rob's back. I was hoping he could make it back. Somebody had this question for you. Rob, can we get an update on the taking care of Maya case?
What
is the taking care of Maya case? And can you give us an update?
So it's Take Care of Maya. So Take Care of Maya was a Netflix documentary that was made after the unfortunate self-unaliving of the mother of a minor child. So Maya Kowalski was, I believe she was 10 years old when she was admitted to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in Sarasota, Florida. That admission was after a diagnosis of CRPS by prior doctors. CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. Basically, your neural synapses are telling your brain that a certain extremity of yours is literally on fire. On the pain scale, it's the highest pain level. People who have reported amputation pain say it's less painful than CRPS. There was parents engaged in controversial treatment, ketamine therapies. There was a ketamine coma in Mexico, and essentially DCF, Department of Children and Families, comes in and removes the child, gets a shelter order on October 13th. The problem is the parents had asked the child to be discharged on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And the hospital had no authority to keep the child after that. Then there's a really complex situation between the shelter orders and the hospital's interpretation of the shelter orders. And you have a whole lot of shenanigans where the daughter's attorney, privately hired attorney, wasn't able to meet with the daughter unless there was someone from the hospital staff standing right outside the door. Phone calls were monitored by hospital staff, not DCF. So you have a lot of issues with Title 39 immunity. So you can't go after the courts or DCF, but then the private hospital. And there was a deposition taken. Oh my God, can I play this clip? Yesterday, defense counsel, I don't know if anyone saw it on Twitter. Defense counsel was
What?
No, it can't cut out. It can't cut out.
I hear you.
I'm just going to upload the file.
Okay. I don't know
Defense
if we can
counsel
play it when you do
is doing a deposition designation.
Mm. You have to share it in a tab or we won't hear sound, just to let you know.
While Rob's loading it, I saw his tweet about it, and it kind of reminded me of the difference that can be between a litigator and a trial attorney. And that seemed to be a litigator asking that question, and maybe not somebody who really understood how it was going to come across to other people.
Oh, and the judge absolutely hates the defense lawyer too, and the prosecutor both.
I'm having the worst connectivity issues alive.
Oh, this would go. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this was bad.
Well, hit play. I don't know. Is it going?
Did anyone see it?
I see a picture.
It's up. Yeah.
I see a picture.
I think you were asked by Mr. Anderson whether mom did everything that she could to help this child. Do you recall that question or some variant thereof?
Yes.
Is it your opinion that maternal suicide is helpful to a child?
No.
What kind of question is that? That'd be my answer. What kind of question is that? That's absurd.
It's a great defense question. I mean, a great plaintiff's question.
Wow.
Like this question. I couldn't believe it.
Oh my God.
When I heard it. I was driving my car and I stopped my car. I was driving my car. I stopped my car and I was like, I did not just hear that.
Yeah, I'd object argumentative and say instruct my client. Not
Anyways,
to
Maya
answer
Kowalski is going to
That's
testify
some
Monday
BS.
afternoon.
Yeah, that's a dark question.
Oh, she's testifying today. This is such a rough trial.
No,
Okay. Well, this
it's
is
been
such
tough.
a, I
I've
mean,
been
a
doing daily
rough-
recaps, so
Wow. All right. Let me get a couple more super chats and we'll wind it up in here. If the state regulates gender affirming care, does this open the door for other surgeries like ear clipping and nose jobs to avoid bullying?
Yes, it does, but the door wasn't open because of that. The door's always been open. The state has always had broad authority to regulate the practice of medicine by including what things are and are not within the practice of medicine. And so, yeah, the door had already been open. Yes, the state could prohibit ear clippings and nose jobs and anything else that the state thought was not within the practice of medicine. So that's not a new problem.
Okay, and that's a weird one too, because I can see there are purposes like, a child who has a cleft palate often will need surgery to, correct things, and that's quite a legitimate surgery. Most, I think, would feel to make them get as close to, I hate to say normal, but average as the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, medicine is in some broad sense a tool. And like any tool is in its abstract morally neutral. It can be used for good and it can be used for ill. And so it's a technology, right? We have the technology to be able to fix this problem. But just because we can fix it, so the technology is morally neutral, but how you apply it is not. So do I have any problem fixing a cleft palate? Of course I don't. But it doesn't therefore imply, as a result, that I don't think there's any role for the state in prohibiting illegitimate medical practices, whether that's surgical, chemical, psychological, or otherwise. There's a role to determine what is and is not a legitimate practice of medicine.
Fair enough. Last question, and I'd say no for me. Have you seen Vivas from yesterday about Trump's judge? I know David's not a fan of the judge and has been going pretty hard on him, judging by the tweets that I've seen, or X posts, or Eeks Zeets. I don't know how you say it. But on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up. Kurt, what do you have going on?
Well, tonight I'm doing a Supreme Court oral react. I think I'm going to.
Is he muted for me too? Or for you?
Yes.
Kurt, you muted yourself.
It's an impromptu joeing.
I thought that's what I thought. I thought, oh, this is the new Joe.
No, it's just my technology cutting out on me once again and frustrating the hell out of me. Can you hear me now?
Barely. It's
All right, skip me. Come back to me.
all right. Sorry, dude. Jeff, what's going on with you?
Well, I was planning on sleeping and enjoying my weekend, but I got to pick up the afternoon session as YNW Melly hearing in about 8 hours from now.
Ooh. That's going to be a tough time. Yeah. So we need to let Jeff take a nap. Steve, what do you have going on?
Well, one thing I'm going to have going on is popping over to see what Jeff was talking about on that motion, because I mean, if you like trial stuff, I don't know how you can look away from a train wreck like that. I'm going to have to see what happened. But I got a stream tomorrow morning, doing those on Saturday morning now to run over what's happened on big cases in the last week or so, with some updates on the Richard Allen case, what the defense has filed lately, what's happening with Darrell Brooks, what's happening with the Crumleys, what's happening with that weirdo that abducted the young girl up in New York, and some other things.
Oof. Kurt, you back? No, you're still mute. Kurt, everybody check out Uncivil Law. He's got cool things coming up. I think he said he's doing a Supreme Court thing tonight before his technology decided to bomb out. And folks, if you like this kind of thing, I do it every Friday. Sorry, Jeff, to bury you, but I have a subtle little reminder. Please consider subscribing if you like this type of content. And I will see you next Friday.